So, all right, good. So, good morning again, and welcome to those who are joining the recording. Today's session is on communication in the workplace. And as I was saying at the start, and sorry, I forgot to click record. I always do. We cover a number of objectives today, and we'll be starting off with communication, what it is, and that process. All right. So let's get right into it. I'm assuming you all can see everything, right? I'm not seeing any feedback on the chat or anything, but I'm hoping you can see the Prezi. I guess you would let me know if you weren't. All right. So let's start with it there. Communication. We see this guy standing here, but this is supposed to be the silhouette of a guy speaking to a woman, right? And well, let's first define it. Okay, communication is a process by which information is transmitted between people, transmitted and understood. When it is understood in the way that it is intended, that's when we refer to effective communication. Okay, so the process by which information is transferred, and how that information is transferred, well, you're seeing it right now. Okay, so for instance, right now I'm transferring information to you via Zoom, via online, via the internet. And the extent to which you understand it the way I intend it, well, that's when we start to get into effective communication. So there's one good example I would like to use very shortly, and you'll see it soon, right? We say that communication is a process, right? And this process is what you see here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this process starts from the sender, usually a sender forming a message in that person's mind, in that individual's mind, some idea, some thought, encoding the message in a way that they think would be appropriate, starting to encode it in their mind. Okay, I'm going to, or maybe on paper or somewhere, right? And then transmitting that message using some medium that we'll speak about, whether it be paper, whether it be email, WhatsApp, doesn't matter. The receiver would receive the message, decode it, and then send feedback to the sender. So you see that process, it's like a circle, right? So it's a process going back and forth. And I'm sure you are familiar with this to some extent. We'll talk about noise after as well. To fully understand this process of communication, I usually at this point would show you a video, a very short video clip, very old video clip, but it's very useful nonetheless. Let me just get a URL for it. Okay, so while I could pull it up here, it doesn't really seem to work that well online. Okay, so in person, sure, but what I'll do, I'll send that link for you in the chat. And what I want you to do is just watch about the first 3 to 4 minutes for me. Okay, so I'm going to post it here. Oh, it's okay. So somebody sent me a direct message. Okay, let's change that. All right. So this is for everyone. Can you just click that YouTube link and just watch the first 3 minutes or so for me? You don't have to watch the whole thing, and I'll just pause at this point. All right. So I think you would have seen enough of that video clip at this point, right? You don't have to watch the whole thing. You can pause it at this point. And I think it's such a good video. Of course, there are many videos you can use, many examples you can use, but I just like this one because it illustrates the point very clearly, right? What errors occurred in the communication process? How can coding or decoding be improved? Well, let's take a look at it with the process model, okay? First of all, what was happening in that scenario there? Who was the sender? Who was the sender? That was the person who was sending a message. You can use the chat, you can use Zoom chat, you can type it in there if you want. Yeah, the customer, right? Yeah, the man with the list. Good, very good. So the man with the list, the person ordering, that was the sender. He formed a message in his mind. Well, he had it actually written down as well, encoded it in a way that he thought the person could understand by just saying the word, saying the item. Transmitted the message, what? Verbally, right? Face to face, verbally. And the receiver would be, of course, the store owner at that point, right? The store owner would, sorry, would receive the message, decode it, and try to understand it, right? Clearly, in that very simple process there, right there, and there were certain problems, certain challenges, right? When he said ooze, and what did he mean by ooze, right? The accent, of course, throwing things off. So you can see, therefore, that the communication process, while straightforward, there can be a number of challenges at any point, right? So he tried to form feedback at certain points because the store owner himself, right, tried to form some feedback. Said, well, use his hands and so on to give some feedback. But we'll get to that just now. All right. We'll get to the feedback point. I don't even want to talk about feedback just yet, just to show you how important it is. Okay. All right. So what can we do to improve communication in that scenario there? What did you see any potential opportunities to improve communication in that scenario? Amish says just give the man the list. All right. Of course, that could be one way. Maybe he can share the list with the guy, the shopping list with the store owner, and the store owner might better understand. So transmitting the message in a different way rather than face to face, perhaps written. But given given this guy's his demeanor and so on, it is likely, Amish, that the list may also be written in a way that isn't fully understood. I mean, if somebody even reads my handwriting, I don't think they can understand it, right? So my handwriting is horrible. Maybe there's the possibility the guy's handwriting could also be horrible. Maybe it's not legible. Maybe it's not easy to understand. And therefore, that could work. It could help. Maybe it could not help. It's who knows, right? Especially for the part for who's, right? Brandon says, I would assume the customer could give the list to the shopkeeper and explain the use of the tools more clearly, since some words have two more meaning rather than one. Right? So that second part, Brandon, when he said, explain the use of the tools more clearly, that could especially be important after receiving feedback from the store owner, right? So when the store owner appears confused, right, and he showed his facial expressions, all of that is a form of feedback, right? Feedback doesn't necessarily have to be words. Forming feedback could be as simple as a confused face, and that in itself indicates some feedback that I don't really get what you're saying, right? So absolutely, right? You could start to use some examples of it. He appeared to try to use some examples, but they weren't that great. When he said O's, right, he could have said letter O's from the start, right? He didn't have to continue on with this guy running around to get a who and then a who's, right, until eventually he got the letter O's. So he could have said letter O's from the very start. So you're right, right? Some better examples he could have given as well. Of course, in modern times, you can even use pictures, right? Different ways to transmit that message. You can show a photo of what you want when you go to a store and say, hey, this is what I want, right? The letter was right there. Of course, these are different times, but that could also make sense. So the point is there are a number of ways you can improve communication. Sometimes we refer to the point about senders and receivers having similar code books. Code books is a term often used to describe similar language, similar gestures, symbols, and so on. So if, for instance, he wanted a candle, he said 4 candles, right? He could have maybe if they shared similar code books, one of the things he could have done was said, here's a symbol for a candle. And I don't know what a symbol for a candle would look like. I don't know if there is one, but maybe there is a symbol for something else, like a hose, like the letter O's or something, okay? So sharing those similar code books or even similar mental models of the communication context can certainly improve communication as well, because they would more easily understand the message being sent. All right. Right, good. Okay. So very good. Oh, it's a bad cough. Boy. All right. The bottom portion of the communication process model that I want to explain to you would be feedback, right? And feedback is, of course, something that could be subtle, from a subtle facial expression that I just said, to forming a message. And it is critical in helping communication become effective or be effective, all right? Because remember, we said communication is a process of transmitting a message, and not just transmitting it, but transmitting it in a way that it is intended from the sender's point of view, right? So transmitting it in an effective manner. That's what that's what we speak about effective communication. And a big part of that is actually feedback, forming feedback, encoding it, the person receiving it, and decoding it. To show you how important feedback is, I have only one exercise in today's class where I need you to volunteer. And that's one of the other reasons why I said online could work well here. It's just one class activity in a sense, okay? So I just need one volunteer, somebody who can draw something for me and take a snapshot of it, a photo of it, to email to me after, all right? So could I have a volunteer? And you need to put on your microphone. Anybody in class? And we have a big class. Well, it's not that big, so. Don't all rush. Okay, I mean, anybody at all? Nobody wants to. I mean, we know each other long enough now, right? I don't think we've been meeting in class almost every week, right? So don't feel too shy. Anybody at all wants to help? Nobody? Testing. Is anybody hearing me? Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. I was not going to say this would be the first class where I had nobody volunteer. All right. All right, Bridget. You could turn on your microphone if you can.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much, Bridget. We really appreciate you volunteering today. Maybe people are afraid that COVID can transmit over my microphone. Who knows, right? Maybe. All right. So thanks so much. And for this quick activity, Bridget, I'm going to ask you to just take out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil.
Okay.
Good? We're all good? All right. Well, you don't have to sit with your back to the class because nobody can see you. The beauty of online. What I'm going to ask you to do at this point is to draw a series of touching rectangles on your paper, right? So you're drawing a series of touching rectangles on your paper at this point. Any number of rectangles you want, once they're touching each other in some way. They don't all have to be touching each other at the same time, all right? And you let me know when you're finished.
I'm done.
All right, thank you. All right, Bridget, so leave on your microphone, please. At this point then, Bridget, I'm going to ask you now, if you can describe your drawing to the class. And the one good thing about this activity is nobody will give feedback because it's online. So nobody is to type anything in the chat. Nobody's to put on your microphone, although nobody was going to do it anyway. And you will actually get no feedback at all. So I just want you to describe your drawing for the class, and everybody else in class at this point, I want you to attempt that drawing, okay? So Bridget, it's all yours.
I drew 4 quadrants.
Go ahead, you can describe it.
It's like a normal rectangle, and it was in 4 different quadrants, like how I would divide for a circle, but I just put it in a rectangle. So
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, thank you. All right, Bridget, so Bridget described her drawing. At this point then, one of the easier drawings, I must say, so this actually gives you a chance here, right? So Bridget, great. At this point then, Bridget, what you can do for me, could you take a photo of your drawing and send it to my email address, please? Whether I suppose you can send it to my UE email if you know it, or if not, you can send it to paul.balwant@live.com, which is I don't use this email at all, but I just use it for class.
Okay.
Let me put it in the chat. So everybody else should draw that illustration for me right now. All right, good. So Bridget, once you have sent it to me, just let me know, and I send it to my UE email or my paul.balwant@live.
I'll send you email.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Change what I'm sharing. All right, so I'm going to share my regular screen. Right? Has everyone finished the drawing? Yes. Okay, good. Brianna, Jalen, thank you. All right. So let me just refresh this. UE. All right, there's nothing too sensitive here. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Bridget. All right. Okay. So this is, let me just open this, I guess. Right. So this is Bridget's drawing, and it seemed like this could go one of 2 ways in my mind, right? And this is one of the ways. So let me see by a show of hands, those who had this identical, well, I can't say show of hands, right? Tell me if you had this drawing exactly as it is here. All right, so one person said me, Alexa. Takea says yes, me. Yep, a few people did, right? Alexa's playing music in the background. Alexa, stop. Right. I'm not sure why. Rock music too, which is cool. All right. Oh, that's because I said Alexa here. Right. Okay, we have Alexa in class. Oh my God, Alexa. All right. That's cool. That's cool. Okay. It has to be the first time I've had an Alexa in class and it led to Alexa coming on. Yeah, thanks to the rock music, Alexa. Appreciate it. I had squares touching like a basic window, not so much rectangles. Of course, only a few people said yes, right? Now there are some persons who may have drawn it vertical, right, rather than horizontal, if that makes sense. And that is one other way I may have been thinking about it. Squares touching like a basic window, not so much rectangles, right? So some persons said theirs were their drawing was a bit narrower and so on. So good. Okay. What you realize is that, let me just switch back to sharing. Right? So what you'd realize is that in giving this assignment, even in a class, if I do it in a face-to-face classroom environment, I would usually be there to see Bridget and I'd say, okay, Bridget, add a few more rectangles in there, you know, maybe about 4 or 5 more rectangles and put them touching in some other way. When Bridget describes the drawing to you online, it's fine, right? She gets no feedback. In class, when I tell students don't give any feedback at all, it's usually near impossible. Persons would usually, raise an eyebrow. Their facial expression would give it away that they're confused still. Okay, you might hear the class start a laugh and all sorts of things, right? That is, of course, because we are so accustomed to giving feedback. Now, in this process here, what I did was I give very simple instructions for Bridget to form the message, encode it, transmit it via online. You all received it and decoded it, but without giving any feedback at all. In this case, of course, though, because the drawing was fairly simple, a few people still got it right. All right, but in the majority of cases, if I had asked Bridget to add a few more rectangles to that drawing, almost no one would get it right. Okay, it would be very close to 0 persons getting this correct. And that is a powerful way to sort of see how important feedback could be. A very simple, a simple drawing. If I next time I could probably say draw 10 touching rectangles, right? And Bridget would say, okay, let me make this a bit more complex. 10 rectangles, nobody gets it right. And that's typically how it would go. Even in this simple, very simple drawing, a lot of people still did not get it correct, simply because feedback was missing from the from the activity. Online, it's as I said, it's even harder. You didn't really give feedback. Nobody would put on a microphone and give feedback, generally speaking. So that happens as well. Okay, let me just put back up the chat. All right. Okay, good. So, of course, if I did over the activity, right, and I said, Bridget, let's do over this activity, but if anybody has any questions, post them in the chat or put on your microphone. Do you think that could improve the number of persons getting the drawing correct? Right, yeah, Brianna says yes, right? Absolutely, right? Jael, right? Yeah, correct. Alexa says. All right, I'm just wait for Alexa to calm down in the background. Alex, could I call you Alex for short? All right. Okay, Alex says yes. So absolutely, right? Thanks, Alex. And that's only because I don't activate Amazon every time. So great, yeah, and absolutely. And that's so important that feedback can be. So you might form feedback in your mind, right? I'm triggering everybody's Amazon. Sorry. So yeah, you might form feedback in your mind. You might say, okay, is it a long, somebody said, their window was short, right? You might form some feedback in your mind. How wide is this window, right? And type it in the chat. You encode it, transmit it over the chat. So although Bridget is transmitting her message verbally online, you might transmit your feedback via text. She receives it and she says, how wide is the window? Oh, okay. The extent to which she understands it, of course, could depend on the noise in the channel, which we'll talk about just now, and then decodes it, all right? So that feedback process can certainly improve communication, and that's why feedback is so important in the communication process. There's one final component to communication, and that is noise. And again, many of you may have heard of this before, noise and how noise in the channel can affect communication, right? So there are a number of ways noise can negatively, adversely impact a message being sent, feedback being sent, or any part of that communication process. Okay, from careless encoding, we saw that in the opening video, right, where the message was encoded verbally, but without much care put into it, without much thought put into how the message was being transmitted. Sometimes in sending a message, even you might encode that message and send it with a typo, or autocorrect changes something, right? Careless encoding, a simple change, a few word changes in a message can seriously impact how the receiver interprets it, right? Up to this week, somebody somebody sent me a message on WhatsApp, and I was so confused when I read it, right? And I was like, what does this mean, right? So I replied question mark with the message, and then I realized it was autocorrect. Okay, so careless encoding, of course, can create that distortion in the message so that it's not necessarily understood correctly. Poor choice of symbols, confusion in the content of the message. We also saw that in the opening video. All right, and you can think about it as well in any of the messages that a person sent you. There are sometimes memes online with persons, older people in particular, using emojis incorrectly, which we'll get to very soon, right? And how that can impact how the message is received and interpreted. There are some funny ones out there. Actual noise, of course, can impact the message and the way it is understood, received. Just think about it could be in so many circumstances. Think about carnival time, for instance. We just got over carnival, right? And that's where everybody was spreading COVID and brought it to school and gave me this thing. But anyway, noise level in the channel. Imagine if you're at a party or in a carnival fete or something, and somebody's talking to you, right? And they're saying something, and you're like, what are you saying, right? I can't hear you. And then that's the actual noise. Okay. They repeat it, you still can't understand. And then after a while, just to sort of satisfy them, you just nod and say, yeah, sure, yeah. We do that sometimes, right? Because of course there's so much noise, you didn't really understand what they were saying, but you just want to stop them from repeating themselves. I'm sure we've all done that at some point when the person was speaking in a loud environment. Noise can obviously impact feedback as well. Excuse me, right? This thing is really, really bad. All right. The perceiver's knowledge, perceptual skills, attention span, right? If I'm speaking about an area, let's say communication today, all right? And some persons here in this class have done a management course, some other management course where they covered communication to some extent, especially the process itself. And maybe you cover the topic of noise. Having that background knowledge of this area already brings you in with sort of that information that you already have, and therefore you're more likely to understand the message I'm communicating than somebody who's perhaps hearing this for the first time. Somebody who read the textbook chapter maybe, or the content in the chapter before class, and read about communication process model and the impact of noise, they are more likely to understand because they have that background knowledge. They have that knowledge of the area already. And this applies to any communication context, really. If you're talking to somebody about any topic, what's an important topic for you all right now? Because what else are you interested in? Music, right? You're talking to somebody about music, for instance, maybe soca music, and the person has a good background knowledge of soca music. When you talk to them about it, they fully understand and can understand what you're saying when you say hui, or say, oh, I'm Marsha Montano, right? Hui, yeah, I know that guy, right? But you have that knowledge of that simple statement, right? Whereas somebody who has no idea about soca music, and then they hear you say hui, they might be like, what is this guy saying, right? What is he talking about? I have no idea. Is he drunk, right? So, of course, knowledge of the area can certainly impact the extent to which you understand the message being sent, right? And thus leading to more effective communication. Attention span is also obviously one that's going to impact that as well. If you have a very short attention span, chances are you may not necessarily be able to listen to for a very extended period of time on any subject matter, okay? Right. There are other ways distortion can come into play, and one of those ways is via empty words. There's some research on the empty words that younger generations can sometimes use to throw off older generations in communication processes. So many young people today can often use filler words, right? What we call filler words or empty words that contributes to imprecise language. They can distort communication, be very confusing and ambiguous to many listeners, persons outside that process. And I was trying to find this YouTube video I found very recently with Karen's, you know, the whole Karen meme, right? Karen's talking and how they speak, right? And it's very similar to this actually. That's why I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it back. Anyway, this is an example here, right? So a student says, no, I've never heard a student say exactly this, thankfully, but close things to this, right? Like, you know, I was so out of it. I was all like, duh, I mean, like, oh my God, okay. So I said, basically, what's happening? Okay, so I told him I'd be there and everything like that, you know, and he's all like not absolutely certain and stuff. It was totally an experience. There's quite a lot of text in there, and but I cannot decipher anything of meaning in there, right? So you know, again, thankfully, not many of you use that kind of imprecise language, but it exists, right? And young people definitely use language like similar to this, which we call filler words, empty words that can create distortion in a message. All right, make it very difficult for persons to understand what they're saying. Has anyone ever heard anything like this before? Any statements like that? I don't know if you have communicated like that. Anybody have any experiences? No? Oh, well, that's fantastic. Nobody had, all right, that's great. But yeah, but you probably have seen or heard of it at some point, I'm sure. That kind of imprecise language, right? Empty words or filler words. Okay. All right. So that's it for the communication process model. There is, we went through the entire model, what it looks like from a sender to receiver transmitting a message, how important feedback is, and then noise, and of course, how noise can impact that entire process. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. All right. Okay, no questions. Thanks, Charis, right? All right, no, but I'm not seeing anybody else. So I'll take that as meaning no other questions. Okay. We'll move on to the second topic then, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions at any point, right? I know some of these topics can be fairly straightforward. Some concepts might not be, but let's take a look at it, okay? The verbal language of work. There are two main concepts I want to talk about for the verbal language of work. One is jargon, and I'm sure you've heard of the term jargon at some point, specialized language used by job holders or members of a particular organization, occupation, right? If I say the word OB, for instance, and you all as management students might say, well, organizational behavior, right? We know what that is. But if I say OB outside of management, in medicine, for instance, they might say, well, obstetrics, it means something else. Similarly, there's different jargon used in different job contexts and so on. I'm not sure if anybody has an example they'd like to share. But the one benefit to this is what? If we're using jargon in an organization, is there any benefit to it? Specialized language used by members in that job, in that occupation. And you can link it back to the process model we just did. Are there any sort of benefits to jargon? Anybody? Simplifies complex topics, yeah? Right, perfect. Thanks, Jael, right? Jael, very good. And Alex, very good. That's exactly it. So when discussing sometimes complex topics within an occupation or a job, very, very well said. Sometimes it's a lot easier to just use jargon. It's more efficient. It's a more efficient way of communicating, right? Less room for misinterpretation because persons almost share similar code books in a sense. In fact, this is exactly what similar code books would be about. So they share that similar language so that within that area, within that occupation or job or organization or whatnot, when we use that type of terminology, persons can easily understand what you mean. I'm hearing a microphone. Anybody want to jump in? Gabriel, you want to add? Okay, I thought you wanted to add something. And you can feel free to do that. Huh? But you could enable your microphone and add an example at any point. Okay. Yeah, so definitely well done. Hit the nail on the head. Very good. Are there then any drawbacks to jargon? Could it be a barrier in any way? And how so, Brianna? New employees might struggle understanding. Very good. Limits communication only to those. So you says new employees might struggle. So new employees, not everyone would understand the concepts as Aliyah is saying, right? Outside of that area, there is a level of understanding or misinterpretation. Can't use it outside the organization exactly. So, and as Alex said, limits communication to only professionals. So again, you're hitting the nail on the head. Very well said. So, yes, it can be a very efficient means of communication within that group, within that occupation, within that job, within that organization. But for those outside that group, whether it be newcomers to the organization, as you said, persons who aren't, as Brianna says, right, persons who are outside of that area, only those who are not professionals in that area, they might struggle to understand what it means, right? And that could lead to more misinterpretation, right? So as Deborah says, it can actually lead to misinterpretation, but for those outside of the area. So very well said. So jargon, yes, very efficient, very useful, can improve communication for those within a group, but for those outside that group, it can lead to the exact opposite, right? Ineffective communication. Very, very well said. Great. Good feedback. Thanks for the responses, everybody. Very, very good. All right. There's one other concept for verbal language at work. Of course, we can speak about verbal language in many ways, right? But these are the two main concepts that really stand out. So that's why I'm speaking about them. The second one is something called intonations, okay? And maybe if anybody just wants to volunteer their name so I can use it for the activity, and that's it. You could just say me, and I'll use your name. You don't have to put on your microphone or anything. Me, Brianna. All right, great, Brianna. So let's use Brianna. Thanks, Brianna. All right. So, Brianna, I'm going to ask you a question, and I would like persons in class, you can either put on your microphone or type it in the chat, right? And tell me what I mean by the question, okay? Does everybody understand, right? Everybody good? Okay. Tell me what I mean by this question. So, I'm going to ask Brianna a very simple question. Brianna, why don't I take you to dinner tonight? What does that question mean? I like Brianna, you know, that I'm paying for dinner. All right. So if I say, why don't I take you to dinner tonight? Does that have any special meaning the way I said it? Right, Jael, right? Okay. Meaning that what? Why I said either you want to take Brianna to dinner instead of her taking you, or instead of you taking someone else, right? Very good, Alex. Very good. Imply that she would have taken you to dinner previously or before. Oh, right, even that as well, Justin, right? Maybe she took me before, right? And this time I'm saying, why don't I take you to dinner tonight rather than somebody else? Okay, so very good. Or rather than you taking me like the last time. Okay, good. If I say, Brianna, why don't I take you to dinner tonight? What does that mean? I like Alex, really strong man. Yeah, yeah, I like that. Okay. Instead of some other guy, very good. Somebody took it before, now is your chance. I like how your phrase this is hilarious. Then I would have taken you before, most likely. Okay. And you take it then I suppose some other guy, right? Exactly. Or some other person. Okay, great. Awesome, Jael, right? So very good. Well said. Well said, everybody, right? So that's it. So I changed, I said, why don't I take it to the night instead of the other person that you were going to go with, right, Brianna? All right. And then let me just use one more. And it could be anyone. I could choose almost any word here. Let's say, Brianna, why don't I take you to dinner tonight? What does that one mean? Right, Shania, I think you sent me direct message by mistake. Yeah, not now, not tomorrow, but tonight. Yeah, instead of any other time, Jalen. Right, very good. Very good. God, this mucus. All right, excellent. Sticking it tonight instead of any other time, Jalen. Right, great. So once again, you hit the nail on the head. Immediate action, right, Brianna? Of course. It was just hypothetical, right? I'm not gonna give Brianna COVID by taking her to dinner tonight. Don't worry. So yeah, it's interesting, right? So what happened there? I can actually change my tone, and it changes the meaning of the sentence, right? The question in this case. And I could put the tone anywhere. Why don't I take you to dinner tonight? Do you have a problem with me? Is something wrong? Is it me, right? And I could put it on almost any word here, maybe with the exception of two, right? And it changes the meaning of the question. So the point I was going to make here is that it's not just what you say, but the way you say it, right? Where you place tone in a sentence. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes you'd find that in using text-based chat can sometimes lose the meaning when persons are trying to emphasize a certain word in a sentence. In your mind, encoding it in your mind, you might have it as a certain way. Why don't I take it to dinner tonight, right? And you want to ask that. When you type it out in text, you have that in your mind. But when the person receives it, they don't necessarily interpret it because intonations are usually lost in text-based chat. So you might want to send a voice note instead, right? Or a voice message, or maybe even call the person. Ooh, look at that, right? Using a phone to call somebody.
Yes, so because you could get a different reaction out when you talk to them verbally rather than just sending it on text.
Correct,
It could be
Tyrese.
more meaningful.
More meaningful. And meaningful in terms of Tyrese, in terms of communicating your intention, right? When
Yeah,
you put
it can impact them differently now,
yeah,
the
Tyrese.
presence of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And you could put tone, you could stress, right? Intonations would be stressing on certain words in order to really emphasize your message, the intention of your message, right? So thanks, Tyrese. Yeah, very thanks. And thanks for jumping in there. Great job. All right. So yeah, well done. And I think hopefully you got the intention of that, right? So intonations absolutely can change the meaning of a message. So yeah, in person, voice note, phone call, that could transmit those tones better. Okay. All right. Well done. Non-verbal language at work is, so we'll just switch across then, right? This was verbal language at work. Non-verbal language at work, sorry, at work refers to the transmission of messages by some medium other than speech or writing. And of course, we communicate loudly using non-verbal language. Some persons say actions speak louder than words. That's a statement we often hear. Well, they definitely do complement words and sometimes can speak louder than words, from what we found. But here's a very simple exercise I want you to we can do together. We can do together as a class rather than individually, okay? This is not based on a scientific study. I want to just highlight that up front. It's just to give you an idea of some of the non-verbal forms of communication that we use and what they can mean, okay? All right. A person nods his head up and down. What could that mean? And you can put it in the chat, you can put it on your microphone, anything. Nodding head up and down. They agree, assent, right? Information understood, right? Correct. Information understood, agree. A lot of meanings here right away, right? So agree. They understood what you were saying. Communicating yes, right? I could communicate yes, correct. Yes, I agree, yes. And it could also mean wanting the person to get on with what they're saying, right? You know, you just yeah, continue. Almost to say continue speaking, right? I'm listening to you. You've seen people do that before as well, you know, when talking to somebody and you see them listening attentively and nodding, right? Just saying, you know, go ahead, yeah, I'm listening, continue. So, right, it could mean that they're agreeing. It could mean that they want you to get on with what you're saying. It could be a number of things, right? Very good. And that's not saying a word, right? That's just simply nodding your head up and down. What about a person's lower lip quivering slightly? Nervous, scared, anxious, right, Brianna? Good. Scared, about to cry, maybe, right? Nervous, yeah, definitely. So a number of emotions being conveyed simply by their lower lip quivering slightly, all right? What about a person's smiles slightly? Something worked out in their favor. Maybe. Just being polite. Maybe maybe they saw something funny in a situation, right? Trying to put someone at ease. Okay, interesting. Jillian and Charis, right? Trying to be polite, put someone at ease. Could see the humor in a situation. Sometimes distracted by a pleasant thought. Okay, that could be a next answer there. What about a person yawns? So you're speaking to somebody and they yawn. That has happened to me before, right? Speaking to somebody and they yawn. Bored or tired, right? Bored. Yeah, bored is the most common one. Tired, sleepy. Yeah, definitely, right? Great. A person shrugs his shoulders. Yeah, Brandon, right? So I think also the previous one. Unsure, right? Charles is unsure, right? Correct. Unsure. My husky yawns when I'm telling him a story. Oh, you have a husky, Brianna? That's really cool. Yeah, I like huskies. Really, pretty. They're gorgeous dogs, huh? All right. Doesn't care. The person is unsure. Yep. Unsure. Correct. Does not care. Very well said. Jael, right? Very well said. Doesn't know the answer. Does not care. It's like, I don't care. You know, do what you want, right? And then finally, a person inhales quickly. Like really quickly, trying to calm down, right? Elias is trying to calm down, right? Perhaps they're experiencing anger in a situation and they want to calm down, or maybe even fear in a situation and they want to calm down, right? Shocked, very interesting one. Shocked, right? Somebody people say shocked. Okay. All right. And that's very good. Very well. Some good thoughts, good feedback. These are all examples of non-verbal communication that can convey a certain message depending on the context. So even though the reason I said it's not scientific is that even though communication researchers study many of these areas of non-verbal communication, sometimes it's very contextual, right? It depends on the context in which it is used, and the meaning can vary depending on that context. And as I said, communication researchers, communication is an entire field, right? Just as a sort of side note, I know we're trying to cover a number of concepts here, but keep in mind that this is an entire field of study like management, like physics, chemistry, hard sciences, marketing. It's even broader than that, right? So communication studies is a very huge field that we're really just trying to narrow down quite a bit in one class. These are just some of the nonverbal communication techniques we use that often go hand in hand with our verbal communication. So while they can have meaning by themselves, right? And I want you to think about that as well, how powerful these forms of nonverbal communication can be to communicate certain feelings, emotions, messages, and so on. Often they are more powerful when used with words as well, together, right? Good. All right, forget the scores and all that. I just want to do it together. This is an exercise we would typically do in class, right? And I didn't want to show you the exercise. So obviously one that we can't do very well online, but I did want to highlight some points here that we could probably mention before we move on, right? And that is that body language is of course nonverbal communication. Body language can certainly impact on the outcomes of employment interview decisions. And research has shown us that sometimes body language can set apart equally skilled candidates in an interview. So candidates who let's say have a similar educational background, similar experience, and so on, applying for a job, what can make the difference is, or perhaps even the way they present themselves verbally is very similar as well. But what can set them apart in a job interview is actually their body language. So body language can be very powerful. When we speak about body language, there are a number of things we can talk about, right? In terms of how you indicate liking and interest by the way you sit, where your toes are pointing. All these things communicate subtly to the receiver, right? How you sit, the position you sit. This is typically what we do in class, right? I'd put 2 chairs in class and have you do a dummy interview. But I would hold your verbal responses constant just to examine your non-verbal language, right? And what we'd find your body language. What we'd find is that sometimes persons might sit further apart. Somebody might move their chair and try to turn it in to face the receiver so that way the interviewer can understand, can hear you better, or perhaps at least show that you are interested in what they are saying. So you communicate liking and interest in certain ways. Touch is sometimes used, but I don't want to get into that as yet because we have to do with cross-cultural communication. Smiling, sitting properly, maintaining eye contact, all of these things, of course, communicate. How the extent to which you fidget, which can, of course, indicate nervous activity. How you sit in terms of a reclining position also communicates a certain thing. Persons of higher status tend to sit in a more relaxed, reclined position, non-erect position almost, right? They don't necessarily sit perfectly straight up at all times. So just a couple of things you can probably note there as well. Physical proximity, physical location also communicates, right? And I was saying that just now, sometimes the interviewer might move his or her chair closer to indicate interest. And that, of course, applies not just to interviews, but communication in general. Okay, so the extent to which you locate place yourself close to another person, which of course varies according to culture, as we will see after the break. All right. Okay, so these are just some of the things I was speaking about, so I'll skip past that. One final form of nonverbal communication that I find interesting that we often tend to ignore is the extent to which, oh, sorry, I didn't see Brianna. Slouching when you're comfortable with someone as well. Yeah, so it wasn't to indicate slouching per se, Brianna, but a non-erect position, right? Yeah, usually indicates somebody who perceives themselves to be of a higher status, but it could perhaps also indicate comfort in a situation as well, familiarity, perhaps, right? All right. Thanks, Brianna. Thanks for the feedback. One additional way that nonverbal communication can take place would be via props, artifacts, and costumes. And this is an interesting one because office layout, furniture, how it's the decor, the arrangement of furniture can convey certain information about the occupant. So we see this guy here in his office with obviously untidy office, and the extent to which that could indicate somebody being disorganized, right? Research has shown us that in a higher education context, for instance, students tend to feel more welcome when an office is tidy. When there's no desk, you see this desk here? It sort of acts as a barrier between the occupant of the office and the person who's coming into the office. So even though it is a physical barrier, it can sometimes act as a barrier to communication as well. So one of the recommendations to make an office seem more welcoming is to actually place the desk against the wall instead, so that there's no physical barrier separating the two persons. Plants and posters have also been shown to be perceived as more welcoming in an office. So that's interesting. And finally, clothing. Clothing can communicate as well, because as you can imagine, clothing sends signals about the extent to which somebody is serious, competent in a job, even about their promotability, can be communicated to external persons. But clothing doesn't just communicate to persons who view your clothing, it also communicates to yourself. All right. How do you think so?
Of course.
Yeah, go ahead, Tyrese. Go ahead.
Well, you see a thing with that now. This is a wide one. This is a good one because your clothing is not necessarily only things you put on, it's also about yourself because you're pulling this together, you like this, and also you could try and how to say it, articulate yourself in promoting a certain vibe about yourself, like certain places might require you to wear this if you're going for an interview, or certain people might try to be seductive with their clothing, and then it have people out there as well with just they're just flashy, they like the style, and
Yeah.
it could show a lot about your personality and your intent as well.
Yeah. So absolutely. Thanks, Tyrese. So Bridget, you want to add something? Oh, I saw Bridget's. Oh, that's
No,
good.
sorry.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Tyrese. And yeah, so that's one of the main points we're making here, right? Clothing certainly can send signals about the wearer, right? What that wearer is trying to communicate to the sender. In a job context, it can certainly send signals about your competence, seriousness, a little bit, perhaps even reveal a little bit about your personality, as Tyrese said. Absolutely right. Clothing has been used in the workplace more and more so to indicate individuality. This is who I am. And we've seen that more and more as time has gone by, right? Even things like tattoos and other things beyond just the clothes you wear. So there's further research on the image you create at work, right? Clothing can also communicate to the wearer himself or herself, because it can have an impact on your self-image and how you feel about yourself. So often, let's say, take for instance, if you dress up, as we say, right, in Trinidad, if you dress up for an interview, put on your finest linens, right, a fancy suit and tie, or a nice shirt, or something, a nice dress, a nice outfit, something that you think, to be a special outfit, something that you wear only for a special occasion. What that can do is it can sometimes enhance your own self-esteem, your own self-confidence, when going to a new job, when going for an interview, or so on, because it communicates to you that this is a serious circumstance, a serious context, a serious situation. So clothing can communicate, yes, to persons who are seeing it, but also to yourself. And that's one of the other points I just wanted to make there. It can enhance your self-image as well. All right, good. Thanks. And thanks for the feedback, Tyrese, as well. I think that was a very good point, because we're seeing that whilst traditionally research focused primarily on clothing, there is a bit more on things like piercings, tattoos, and so on at work even. Okay. One final area that I wanted to cover very quickly before we go on a short break, which will give me time to maybe drink some tea, get my voice back again, is computer-aided communication. Computer-aided communication, there's just one side I wanted to show, because what we're going to talk about is this concept called media richness, which refers to the data carrying capacity, meaning the volume and variety of information that can be transmitted using a certain medium, right? So the data carrying capacity of a specific medium. And I wanted to share an example with you, right? So, of course, okay, let's look at it in terms of the diagram here. We have on the y-axis media richness, on the x-axis the complexity of the task. Okay. This week, well, in the previous week, of course, right? So this week I obviously was sick. I'm sick, I don't know, right? I didn't test it as yet. Okay. The point is, person sent me some emails about the assignment, the literature review. Some asked questions that we, repeating things that we asked in class, and I didn't really respond to those as yet. Some persons asked questions, some good questions, right? But via email, it was a bit difficult for me to respond because I couldn't just respond with a simple message. They asked a very complex message in that email that would require my communication to the class as a whole, or at least personal or face-to-face or whatnot, right? So of course, I think some people were leaving it for a bit too last minute, and hence some of the good questions were coming out very last minute rather than a bit earlier in the semester, maybe maybe even 2 weeks ago, which would have been fantastic. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that the message that they wanted to ask was very complex, okay? The complexity of the communication task would have been more to the right side of the x-axis, okay? But they were sending it via email. So when they sent it via email, for me to reply via email would lead to an oversimplification of the response I would want to give. However, if it was, let's say 2 weeks ago, and they came to me face to face, I would have said, fantastic question. Either let me discuss it to the class as a whole, or meet with me after class in my office. I'll go through it in some detail with you because there's a lot of complexity in that question. So the point I was getting at is that when information is very complex, usually you'd want to use a richer form, something that is richer in terms, a richer form of a medium to communicate, right? In this case, when they send such a complex task via email, I would want to reply via face-to-face because it's so complex. If I do reply via email, I would certainly be providing an oversimplified response, okay? Similarly, if somebody, let's say I want to communicate something to the class as a whole, right? A message that I did actually, I want to communicate a message that class will be online rather than face-to-face because I don't want to risk spreading this horrible virus. I did not say Alexa. Alexa, stop. What is going on with Alexa? I'll unplug it after during the break, okay? All right. So let's say I want to send a message to the class saying that class is going to be online, okay? Now this is a very, in terms of complexity, how complex is that message? I just want to say to the class that it's going to be online instead of face-to-face because I'm sick and I don't want to spread my germs. Is that very complex? I don't think so, right? No, right? Brianna says no. And absolutely not, right? It's no, the complexity is low. It's not very complex. In that case, imagine if I said, okay, I want to have class online. Let me arrange a meeting face-to-face with each student and each of the 200 students in OB to let them know that class is going to be online, right? So in terms of complexity, if I arranged a face-to-face meeting or even a Zoom meeting with each of the 200 persons in class to say, hey, Brianna, I'm sick. I'm going to have class online. Thanks for meeting with me. Anything you want to discuss about class being online? And then I say, okay, great. Let me go and have my next meeting now with JL and then Brandon and Aliyah and then Kiana, go through the entire class with meeting each person. Obviously, it overcomplicates things, right? So at that point, clearly you'd want to use something that is more effective for something not complex, which would be something like an email message or the My Learning platform in this case, which would send an email. So the point then is that we have to determine how complex a message is in order to understand what's the right medium to use. That's one of the reasons why I actually didn't respond to some of the emails as yet, because the messages were so complex that I can't reply properly via email for some of them. And I really wish persons had seen me a bit earlier, but still I could discuss them after class today, okay? Any questions on this then? Media richness. So there's a sort of zone of effective communication where the more complex the messages, we want to use a richer form, a richer medium of communication. The less complex the messages, the more routine it is, right? Routine or clear messages, we can use a less rich form of communication. And that's the main takeaway. Yeah, complex and impractical. Any questions? Any questions at all? on media richness. I think it's a fairly straightforward one. And that's why, okay. If you have no questions. Oh, there was one point I just quickly wanted to sorry, I forgot to mention actually. There is, of course, and I kind of added this in the past couple of years because there is some research on the use of emoticons, emojis, whatever we want to call them, in communication today, right? So what we're seeing is that researchers have actually been examining the impact of emojis in workplace communication, sorry, and it's an interesting line of research because previously in the past, sometimes this was viewed as being somewhat unprofessional in all contexts, always omit emojis and emoticons, but the workplace is changing. We're seeing a lot more organizations, teams, groups in organizations forming WhatsApp groups. So not just emails, but using emojis, of course, in this form of social media, right? Whether it be, what typically WhatsApp groups, as we tend to find in our own country, right? What this means then is that emojis are becoming increasingly used to the point where it's obviously receiving researchers' attention because we're seeing thousands upon thousands of emojis being used daily, right, to communicate. So what has research shown us that these messages need not be emotion-free. And one of the main challenges about email and communications at work that aren't face-to-face is that they used to be considered emotion-free. Persons can't express their emotions in a message, right? Besides using all caps, for instance, which is often perceived as being rude, rather than shouting and saying, this project needs your immediate attention, and putting it in all caps, that is still not seen as appropriate, right? So instead, emojis have taken that sort of role. They've taken up that role and in a very powerful way to help us communicate at work. Of course, it still has to be used responsibly in a work context. I don't think people will be wanting to send messages with bygone or melanjon in a message, right? Simply because of the connotation attached to that emoji. But what we do see will be things like the wince face, the sad face, the crying face, and these things have different meanings. Of course, the original meanings aren't necessarily the meanings that they carry in a particular culture. So it varies again depending on the culture, and that kind of leads me into my final topic that I'll discuss after the break. But how we use it definitely varies according to culture. Do you know these emoticons? What's the difference between these? I don't know all of them. I know there's the original intention for some of them, but shocked face, how do you use this? I think this is supposed to be sick, right? But I don't think persons use it as sick. I don't know what you use this one for. The sixth one, I don't know if you see my mouse, but the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a sigh. So everybody uses a sigh, right? Alex says a sigh. I didn't even know that, right? So sigh. This one might be used for, the second one might be used for what? Frustration. This is me with the cough right now, frustrated at the cough. I guess this is a kiss, or a kiss with, I don't know, blush maybe, I don't know, right? But the point is, of course, we use them at work. So it is playing a role beyond just regular communications in our everyday lives. And I just find that so, so interesting, so intriguing, how much emojis have changed communication at work. So I just thought I'd share that. And there's, of course, some research showing that it can lead to increased feelings of empathy. When persons read a message, they can more relate to it. They think that you understand their point of view, and it can also soften the tone for some harsher messages as well. But that's just scratching the surface. There's a lot more to this. Use a middle grimace for assignments. Oh, this is for assignments. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Brianna. And Brianna's emoji right there, right? That's a kind of, this is supposed to actually be, I think, a sweating emoji where somebody's sweating, but we don't use it for sweating per se, right? So just going to show you how they have evolved in the emojis and how they've evolved as we continue to use them. So good. Thanks, Brianna, for assignments. Like which assignments? All right. Good. Okay. So that's good. We can probably, let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back to do the other topics after the break. So we'll take 10 minutes. I'll just pause everything. I'll pause the recording. No, I won't. I won't pause the recording. So if those who are watching the recording can probably fast forward 10 minutes, okay? All right. I'll be right back. All right. I think that's 10 minutes and we could probably resume at this point. Okay, so welcome back. Let me just make sure we have about 50 persons here. Okay. Right, so I know some persons are obviously missing class to write the literature review, which would be very last minute, I suppose, if they are now starting it or but anyway, it is what it is. Let's move on then. And so far we've covered quite a number of topics in the area of communication. We started off with communication, why it's important. One of the things I forgot to mention early on actually would be how important it is. It's communication is important for every area in OB almost, right? So when we talk about, for instance, the class where we did decision making, communication was critical for that activity, right? It was critical for Chris Marshall and the team to determine for making decisions, for Chris to communicate, for everybody to communicate their message and get it across the way they want to, right? Communication was absolutely important for that activity, for decision making, for activities we still have to do, things like leadership, conflict management, teams, right? I know we didn't do that as yet, but you'll see next week, hopefully, if I should be back out next week, and we can see how important it is for teams and teamwork. We'll see how important it is for leadership. In fact, some leader behaviors are defined as communication, right? Different types of communication, like inspirational communication, for instance. It's important for persuasion. It's important for changing beliefs, values, right? So communication plays such a critical role for almost every area in OB. And that is also one of the reasons why it's obviously going to be in the exam to some extent. It's not a question on communication, but it can be used to frame an answer for at least one of the questions in the exam. That's why it's obviously it's central to almost every concept in OB. And that's why it's so important. Anyway, all right. Moving on then, one of the topics I wanted to cover would have been, at least somewhat briefly, is that of gender differences in communication and what we know. So gender differences in communication styles influence the way that men and women are perceived and treated in the workplace. In today's image, for the Prezi image, I intentionally chose a man and a woman, right? So let's take a look at it. Gender differences in communication styles revolve around the one-up, one-down approach. And this is based on Deborah Tannen's research, which was, which was primarily in the 90s, but since then, we have seen some further research in the area as well. What Deborah Tannen's research shows us is still applicable to some extent, although some persons might quicker categorize it as masculine versus feminine rather than men, and not versus, but contrasting masculine and feminine styles versus men and women styles. But however you want to look at it, and I may use the term men and women, but it may also mean masculine versus feminine, is that men or masculine styles tend to be more concerned about power dynamics in a communication process, whereas women styles tend to revolve, or feminine styles tend to revolve more around building relationships. Okay, so the point then was that in Deborah Tannen's research is that men tend to use talk and communication to emphasize certain things that would lead to increased perceptions of being more powerful in a communication situation. So in other words, they like to emphasize status, whilst women might use communication more to create connection. All right. The point then, in a nutshell then, what men do is that they are more sensitive to power dynamics and tend to use communication to position themselves one up over the other party, right? Almost in a more competitive way. Whereas women tend to use communication in ways that avoid putting others down because they tend to be more concerned about building relationships. But that tends to lead them finding themselves in a one down position, which is not necessarily bad either. All right. Okay.
Yes, and that's the whole thing with it, right? It essentially became more combat based over the years rather than getting to know an individual for what they really are and what they are really bringing to the table per se. Because with regards to the men now, men's sides of things,
Mhm.
You know, it's always about who could control the conversation and who will be putting themselves in a position where they might be more right than this person or their fellow peer, rather than let's come to a conclusion or a solution together and respect each other different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for where did the chat go? Right. Yeah. Thanks so much for that, Tyrese. I'm not sure why Zoom just decided to cut off my participants window, but all right, there we go. All right, yeah, Tyrese, well, very, very well said. And this is, of course, one of the challenges. You're getting right into some of the challenges that result from these differences in communication styles. And that would certainly be one of the challenges, right? Because what Deborah Tannen's research has shown us is that because they are so concerned, men and the masculine style is more concerned about power dynamics, it can lead to certain problems, exactly like what Tyrese was talking about, actually, right? Well, just to give you some examples, and then I'll follow up on Tyrese's point. So things like getting credits. Men are more likely to blow their own horn about something good because, again, it puts them in a one-up position. They tend to be more boastful about themselves and their capabilities. They do not like to ask for questions. When it comes to asking questions, they generally do not want to ask for things like directions when lost, puts them in a one-down position. Women often say the term, "I'm sorry," to express concern, but that can sometimes put them in a one-down position. When it came to feedback, where Deborah Tannen found was that men tend to be more blunt and straightforward with criticism, whereas women would often start with praise first. When it came to compliments, women were more likely to compliment, men were more likely to critique because of the same differences we just spoke about. Men wanting to play to those power dynamics, whereas women wanted to play more to building relationships. When it came to ritual opposition, men were more attacking, challenging, combative, as Therese was saying, and even argumentative towards others' point of view because they were so concerned with positioning themselves one up over the other party, which again leads to the challenges that Therese mentioned about instead of trying to sometimes understand the other person's point of view and take that into account, their natural style of communication can sometimes lead to challenges in doing that very trying to understand somebody else's point of view when in any sort of communication situation. Men tend to spend more time communicating with supervisors and talking about their achievements because it positions them one up, again, building power. And when it came to directness, women were more indirect in giving orders. So again, some differences in terms of men versus women or masculine versus feminine, which can lead to certain challenges. And I'm glad that Tyrese right away got into some of those challenges, like being more combative, leading to problems with men or those using a masculine style to be less receptive to what somebody else is saying because they want to believe that they are right because it positions them one up. So there are some lessons here, therefore, right? One, and this, of course, is I'll speak about Tyrese's lessons first, and that is that people need to learn how to adjust their styles and sometimes fight against their natural style of communication. So women can learn at times to be more direct, right? Which might be against their natural style of indirect. Sorry. The men, of course, need to be able to give more constructive feedback, be more receptive to information, and that sort of thing. Okay. Sorry. And of course, that's one lesson for persons themselves. In organizations, people have to, of course, recognize that men and women will have varying linguistic styles. And of course, how they understand and react to these different linguistic styles is going to be important. How well they can adapt to these different linguistic styles and not necessarily assume that men and women are just going to communicate the same way. All right? That's just not the case based on what we know. So two main lessons there, therefore, would be one, organizations need to be able to learn how to adapt and respond to differences in linguistic styles, and people themselves, men and women, need to take initiative to adjust their styles in a way that could be more suited to the workplace environment. For instance, what Tyrese was saying about men being more receptive and less combative at times. All right. So Giovanni, I saw your emoji. What do the eyes mean? It's interesting, interesting line of research.
So I also have something else to add.
Sure.
I was watching the diagram, with the stick figures, the male and the female.
Right.
And I noticed Mars red and the other planet blue. By any chance, you know about the red pill and the blue pill?
Of course,
You
I
know,
mean,
though I had to bring this up because this
mm,
diagram is a perfect example of what's going on right now, what's trending right now within the society,
mhm,
and and this whole manosphere. Because right now, that simple diagram there is a whole summary of what's going on with
really.
regards to, yeah,
Mhm,
really, with regards to masculine versus feminine, when in actuality it's supposed to be more unisons between the two genders. And it's sad because people of now really forgot how beautiful it is, the union between man and woman, and how actually they can together, and it's almost unstoppable to beat something like that. And to see what is being portrayed now
mhm.
and the amount of disadvantages, what men have to go through and what women have to go through, and people not realizing that agendas are being pushed to naturally put men and women against one another. So,
Mhm.
that is just all I want to say. I really won't go too deep in it because I know you have to move on with the class. But it was a nice thing to add now
No,
because I
definitely. Yeah,
realized
yeah,
the colors between the
yeah,
two planets. That simple
yeah.
diagram sum up everything I did.
Thanks, Tyrese. Yeah, and of course, yeah, you'd see. I have some idea what you're talking about. When you started to elaborate, I had a better idea of what you were talking about. Of course, with modern times, we have seen a lot of division between the biological genders. Unfortunately, um, I watch YouTube a lot, so I do get some of those things on my YouTube feed as well, showing the huge divisions, even in things like gym and working out, and seeing that men asking for a man only gym because of the radical feminism that exists and so on. So there are a number of issues, obviously, surrounding this whole topic here that is difficult to disconnect from differences in gender communication, obviously. So it's interesting that you kind of just contextualizing it for modern times to know that there are further challenges that we may be that we certainly are experiencing, um, not just in the workplace but in general. How these things will play out in the future, obviously, is going to be important because, as you said, when Deborah Tanner did this research initially, it was in the 90s, and the challenges weren't necessarily going to be as extreme as they are today with social media and radical feminism and all these things. So yeah, it's obviously we're heading on a tricky path, and we have to be very careful. I know it's a lot to unpack, but thanks for at least highlighting that point for us in terms of realizing that whilst these challenges exist in the workplace, the extent to which they continue to exist or will be exacerbated going forward is certainly something we have to keep our eyes on, just to see how everything plays out in the future. And it is a bit disturbing at times, seeing some of the things that I see on social media and how far we've been pushed to create division between the genders, certainly. Thanks for that, Tyrese, for the context. One of the other topics would be, of course, politically correct communication. This is obviously a next one that is certainly changing with the times. So still, there is some research on politically correct communication where certain words can stereotype, intimidate, and even insult individuals. In an increasingly diverse workforce, we must be sensitive to how words might offend others. We call it PC culture sometimes, right? Sometimes with negative connotations, but there is some merits to some parts of it, okay? So, for instance, removing certain terms from our vocabulary like handicapped, blind, elderly, handicap being replaced with physically challenged, blind being replaced with visually impaired, elderly being replaced with senior. To some extent, some of those things do not seem too problematic, all right? But And very recently, a student actually informed me, because I said that, I was arranging for my daughter, with my daughter, sorry, to give some of her old toys to the poor. And I said that, and she told me, well, how could you say that, right? How could you say it to the poor? It's just something that, I grew up learning for many, many years from a different generation, perhaps. Always give to the poor, give to the poor. And she said, well, you shouldn't say the poor, you should be saying, less fortunate. And I said, well, thanks for that. I don't think it's any stretch to move to the less fortunate. And I think that's is more politically correct. So, of course, there are ways that we can learn and adapt and learn to improve our language to be more politically correct. But there are going to be some terms that, for instance, removing terms like death with negative patient outcome, garbage with post-consumer waste materials, quotas limits, setting limits for, with educational equity, and even women being replaced with people of gender. So obviously, when we go too far, that could create problems in terms of communication as well. Removing certain words from the vocabulary certainly makes it harder to communicate accurately at times. So we have to be very careful about where we draw the line, what is politically correct in a way that caters to the sensitivity of different persons, different parties, absolutely. But when we go too far, it definitely can create some problems. Brianna says a balance of masculine and feminine energies in an individual is ideal, replacing death with mortality, right? Yeah, so death with mortality, death with negative patient outcome. And, that mightn't seem too bad, but then, of course, death is just something that has consistent meaning and has for many generations. Does it make it wrong or right? It's debatable, okay? So yeah, so we have to be, again, careful about how we approach politically correct communication going forward, and very much in a PC type culture, especially in places like the US, where it could be considered overly PC culture. I don't know if anybody here watches South Park, PC Principle and all these things. I mean, I didn't watch it in a while, but that was hilarious, yet scary to see how things can get. All right. And it's just a funny comic from the far side, but actually Dorian I rather resent being called a swamp thing. I prefer the term wetlands challenge mutants. I just thought it hilarious. And this one doesn't seem that bad either. But that's kind of subjective, isn't it? All right. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on a couple of those topics just for your awareness of it. Of course, there's more research on politically correct communication, and you will continue to see more research in this area in the field of communication studies, given how much it has been impacting certain popular societies like the US, for instance, okay? The final topic is cross-cultural communication, and the way I plan to cover this one is a bit different. I am not going to use this game that I could use in a face-to-face class. I kind of change it up a bit, and you'll see it very soon, right? What I'm going to ask you to do, while I explain it a bit, I want you to, let me stop sharing this for a second. I'm going to pull up a web browser here, 1 second. All right. Screen share. Okay, here we go. Share. Participants, all right. Okay, so you should be able to see this. Select a game mode, classic, sure. Host game. Right, so the problem with Kahoot is something I've used for years, and it was always a fantastic platform. And I could pay for it, yes, but I wanted to try some alternatives first before spending my UE money on it. And I thought this one seemed to receive a lot of attention, Bloquette. And there are a couple others, but I said, let me try this one first, okay? I don't need random questions. I won't. Okay, late joining, use random names, number of questions, 20. And we don't need audio. Okay, so if you go to this website here, I'll just post it in the chat if I can. Why is the chat not coming up? Okay. And this will help me to explain why is the chat not coming up. Because somebody sent a message in the chat, I'm not able to use it for some reason. I'm not sure if Zoom is giving problems. Okay, somebody sent a message and I didn't, I saw the notification, but I can't read it. Oh God, this is horrible. Who can see your messages recording on Zoom? All right. All right, but that's okay. People are able to join in, and that's the main thing. It sucks that I can't use the chat, but it's okay. All right, so while you're joining in, you can go to play.bloquette.com and enter this ID. So I'm glad a lot of people are able to join in. That's great. And what I'll do, I'll be covering some concepts in cross-cultural communication via this activity. Communication is obviously going to be easier between individuals who share similar cultural values. For those of you who are typing in the chat, unfortunately, I'm not able to see anything in the chat. All right, I don't know why Zoom is being so mean to me, but that's is what it is, I guess. If you want to put on your microphone and say something, please do. And in the meantime, while persons are joining in, and we do have a limit of 60, but thankfully the class is 46, so everybody can join. All right, far better than than Kahoot at least. All right. If and while persons are joining, just a quick question. And again, I can't see the chat, unfortunately. So if you can put on your microphone, that'll be great. If everybody spoke the same language, so let's say everybody spoke English language, would that remove cross-cultural communication problems? I can't see the chat, so I don't think people will put on their microphone. I'm not gonna restart the class either, because man, I hate Zoom sometimes. All right. At least it didn't crash on me. Zoom usually crashes. All right. Yes, no, what do you think? Anybody? During our COVID period, I actually used to use Discord because of the problems with Zoom, and people would just type in Discord and that would be a lot easier. Never any problems at all. Anyway, you're probably saying no, right? I'll just assume you're saying no. And that is because even if everybody spoke English, right? Think about it this way, right? British English, US English, Trinidad English, Guyanese English, curry chicken, chicken curry, right? It doesn't matter. Even if we all spoke English, there are still likely to be cross-cultural communication problems because of things like the use of certain words. So for instance, how we use certain words, the phrases, just like we just said, chicken curry, curry chicken, curried chicken is correct. Lift versus elevator in certain countries. You know, when I was in England, they would say lift. Back in Trinidad, we use elevator. Even the tone in which people speak is very different. So for instance, in Australia, when they speak, and I had an Australian professor when I was studying my PhD, it's very blunt and aggressive. It can be perceived as blunt and aggressive coming from a Western culture. But that's normal in their culture, right? That's what they consider a normal way of speaking. There are differences in terms of non-verbal language, touch, the extent to which touch is acceptable, how close people stand to each other. In the US, you know, people in the USA, for instance, people generally prefer to keep their distance with having a personal space, but even that can vary. We might say they prefer to keep some distance, but even that distance might seem too small for some Trinidadians. And while persons are joining in here, I'm starting to see a slowdown. Personal space is certainly something I experienced as well, even having a professor from the US when I was in doing my master's at the UWI. I recall that he would often stand very close when speaking to me, and it felt a bit uncomfortable to me, but I was his considered normal space. Again, we're both speaking English, but it's leading to some cross-cultural challenges in terms of our communication, because I could often not hear what he's saying simply because I'm so focused on my personal space or what I consider appropriate, right? Things like etiquette, politeness varies across cultures. There's this very good example of a Chinese guy in a meeting, the Canadian guy was in a meeting in China, I believe it was, right? And the Chinese guy says, the Canadian guy says, wow, you have a very attractive wife, and the Chinese guy responds, no, my wife is ugly, of course, to the Canadian guy, he's in shock, right? He says, well, how could you say that? Your wife is ugly. He didn't mean his wife was actually ugly. He was just being excessively polite to say, well, no, she's not attractive. She's it's just an excessive form of politeness that the Canadian guy was not accustomed to. And the other things, the social conventions, the way we say hello, difference in lateness, absenteeism, lateness for meetings and so on, varying. How loud cultures are. Middle East cultures can be very loud compared to different the UK, for instance, where it's a bit quieter. So it really varies. There are a lot of other variations, and that's what I wanted to show you here. There are so many cross-cultural barriers that can exist.
I wanted to add something.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Brianna. Lovely.
Okay, I just wanted to say, so like right now I'm trying to learn Korean with Duolingo, but then there's different dialects of Korean in different parts of Korea that I'm like, I might see it in a YouTube video and be like, I have no idea. I didn't learn that on Duolingo, Like, so learning it in an academic sense is different as well, unless you actually go to the country and you are immersed in their culture. You might necessarily know their dialects as well. And I think people who learn English might have the same problem. As you said, like curry duck and things like that. They mightn't learn that in an academic setting, like in class, and then they would come here and then be like, okay, now I have to learn the dialect to fit in with these people. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brianna. Wonderful example. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, Brianna said it very well. And there are certain nuances in our culture that aren't going to be captured in a course, right? As Brianna was saying. So even when learning about Korean, I think it was what Brianna was saying, having to pick up on the nuances in that culture is very different to having to learn about it from a course, right? Duolingo. So great. Thanks, Brianna. Thanks. And let's see some other examples here that we'll go through. And of course, I'm going to ask you to jump in as well and take a guess, take a stab at it first, and then we'll see how people score. Okay. If those who, just even though it's just for fun, but you also learn something alongside it. I'll see who places in it, places in the top 3. Maybe I can actually bring a prize this time after being scolded for not having a prize available the last time. So let's take a look at it, okay? I'm starting it, all right? In which of these countries would male professionals be most expected to wear a suit regularly at work? Five seconds. 2, 1, right? Let's see. How did people respond? United States. Okay, nobody said India. All right, interesting. So India was the correct answer. I thought I could pause it there. All right, so everybody is in first place. So everybody's tying. Great job, great job. So yeah, in India, actually, get ready. I wonder if I could pause this. In which of these countries is it least appropriate to use colorful or exaggerated words to emphasize something? 10 seconds. Let's pause. I could pause, right? France, some people said France, Australia, right? So these are the responses. Wait, where's this image? Why is it not showing? And the correct answer, Switzerland. So 11 people actually got it correct. It also takes into account how quickly you respond, okay? It's to give you more points or whatnot, all right? Okay. Let's take a look at the third question. You visit somebody from Tibet, right? A tribesman who sticks out his tongue at you. The tribesman is signaling that what? One second. Right? And how are the responses? Right, you're welcome here. Most people said that actually. And you see simple ways of saying hello. Now, of course, you will not necessarily learn something like this in a course when you're learning a different language, but maybe not, depending on how the extent to which how comprehensive that course is. But even the way people say hello, sticking out their tongue at you, right? Interesting stuff. Okay. All right, Charles in the lead, Brown Boy second. All right, let's go on. We're still early in the game, okay? People, particularly men, from which of these countries tend to shake hands the most? 10 seconds. Two seconds, one. All right. And a lot of people said Japan, interestingly enough, okay. France being the answer. Scotland, some people said Scotland. All right, very few people said France. Right, probably thinking about the kiss, right? The kiss on the cheeks, right? They tend to shake hands the most out of these four at least, okay? All right, so let's move on to the next question. When doing business with clients in Thailand, which of the following is considered particularly rude or unprofessional? Tough one. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Come on, guys, take a guess. 1. All right. Yeah, showing the bottom of your feet or shoes. Okay, and the answers were fairly split. All right. Several people enter an elevator in a Japanese company. Who should take responsibility for operating the elevator? This says the most junior person. This says the most senior person. Okay, good. Right, and the correct answer would have been the most junior person unless he or she is far away from the controls, okay? The person close to the Good try, good try. All right, let's keep going. I can't see the chat, so we'll just keep going, okay? In southern France, you indicate to your concierge that your room is fine by giving the A-OK signal. To him, this means what? Five seconds. Quickly, 2 seconds. All right. Well, yeah, so some people said it's okay. A lot of people said it's okay just fine. But you see how simple these things are. We're talking about things like pressing an elevator button, signaling everything is fine, which we normally do. That means very different things in very different cultures. Huh? The A-OK gesture is saying it's worthless, right? Hey, you know, so it's simple things again, you know, simple nuances. You want to indicate your room is fine, and you tell them, hey, my room is worthless, right? And this, of course, it can be viewed in Australia and Islamic countries as flipping the bird, meaning raising your middle finger to somebody, right? So we have to be careful. In US, yeah, in our Western culture, all right, or good going, you know, it's good, I like it. Whereas in other countries, it could be equivalent to raising your middle finger. Interesting stuff. All right, let's move on. With some new persons in the lead, but let's take a look. We're still early in the game, okay? In which of these countries are 2 male business associates most likely to hold hands or be arm in arm in public? This one caught me. I didn't expect it. Five seconds, 4 seconds, come on. I kind of give it away by saying it caught me. Saudi Arabia, right? Yeah. So Saudi Arabia was the answer. A lot of people got that answer correct. Brown boy in the lead. All right. For most Americans, sticking your thumb up with a closed fist means everything is okay. In Australia, it means what? 5 seconds. All right. Everything is okay. So some of the things are applicable to some extent in a variety of cultures, and this is one of them. Only one person said it. Okay, a lot of people said a rude gesture. Yeah, I thought so at first too, actually. But one person said everything is okay, so it's the same. It's kind of a trick question in a sense. All right. So question 10. Nodding your head up and down tends to mean no in which country? Nodding your head up and down. 5 seconds. All right. A lot of people said Bulgaria, and they were correct. Very good. A lot of people knew that. Okay, well done. So simple things, nods. All right. In many parts of India, when people rock their head slowly back and forth, side to side, it usually means what? 10 seconds. I know a lot of Trinidadians will get this correct. All right. Correct, right? Yeah. Yes, I'm listening, right? Most persons got it correct. Of course, we have a very strong Indian community in Trinidad. I know Trinidadians in general seem to love watching ZTV and Bollywood shows for whatever reason. And certainly you probably are familiar with that head nod. All right, so yes, I'm listening. Very good. Most people got it correct. Okay, question 12. In which of these countries do people tend to have the least physical distance between them in lines, conversations, etc.? We were just speaking about this. Right. No, remember I said in the US, you're right, huh? We did say in the US, the physical distance is not very great, but that depends, and I did say it in the statement, I said it depends on which countries we're comparing it to, all right? Because if when we compare it to Trinidad, for instance, I would say it was still larger, generally speaking, than what we consider appropriate in Trinidad. So in these 4 countries here, Argentina, would be considered the least physical distance between them in lines, conversations. But good try with the US. Theirs is also considered fairly small in terms of physical proximity. All right. Okay. In which country do people typically give brief and not so firm, fairly weak handshakes between men? Like a floppy fish handshake. 5 seconds. All right. The answer is France. A lot of people said China. Yeah, I could see why. But France being the answer there. Okay, good. All right, let's move on to the next one. We're getting to the final 5 just now. In which of these countries is it usually inappropriate to set up an important meeting for Friday afternoon? I know Trinidad is not here. 5 seconds. Right. Let's see. The answer here was Israel. Okay. A tough one, I would say, Israel being correct answer. Okay, good. A lot of people got that correct. Well done. All right. Well done. Right. Managers from which country are least likely to tolerate someone being 5 minutes late for an appointment? Least likely. 3 seconds. Come on, quickly. Right. Outside between Sweden and US. Really good guesses here, right? Sweden and US, of course, because in Brazil, it's more, in that culture, they tend to be more tolerant of it, even in Australia to some extent. But Sweden and US, certainly the top two in terms of their tolerance for lateness, with Sweden being right at the top there. So again, differences in culture and the expectations, even if they are speaking the same language, but in this case they're not, but you get the point. All right. All right. Which of these gestures has the specified meaning in virtually every part of the world? Tough one. It's actually pretty, it's not too challenging. Hurry up, 2 seconds, quickly. Let's go. All right. Yeah, very good. All right. So yeah, smiling to show happiness or politeness. Very good. Most people got that correct. Let's move on to the next one. All right. So hi is in the lead, super second, TH is third. Where's Brown Boy? Brown Boy disappeared from the list. All right. All right. When trying to point to an object, Japanese people tend to do what? Two seconds. Okay. Right, so what do people say? Point with an open hand. A lot of you know this. I think a lot of you watch anime and so on, so very good. A lot of you knew this one. Point with an open hand. Good. In the United States, scratching your head usually means that the person is confused or skeptical. In Russia, it means what? All right. A lot of people seem to, what responses were split, right? Okay. You're crazy and confused and skeptical, right? Same thing. Trick question. I'm listening carefully. I want to get to know you better. Okay, good. All right, so we're down to the final two questions. TH in the lead, Pimp second, and Staffy third. All right, fourth and fifth. I'll take a screenshot after. Soup TH, okay. Oh, there were changes. Okay. In which country is it usually not necessary to spend hours discussing networking topics before turning to business? Three seconds. Okay. A lot of people said Hong Kong. You got that correct, right? Good. And let's see. I think this shows me the changes in placements here now. Let's see. Soup in first, CH, okay. All right. With question 20 already. Here we go. Which of the following gestures have the same meaning in almost every part of the world? An easy one to finish off with, okay? All right, good. So a lot of people got it. Well, actually 16 people said yawning. All right. You already showed tiredness. Okay, I can see why. All of the above though would be in almost every part of the world. I think that's been the key part there. Good, very good. And this, I think this was very useful to emphasize a lot of the cross-cultural challenges that people experience. Let me just take a screenshot of this. I don't know who Soup is, who C is, and who I'll save it on my desktop for next week, right? So I'll remember that I have to give a prize. Okay. Good, very good. So yeah, the point was really though, to emphasize, yeah. Celine, you're C. Okay, okay. Celine, you have to remind me next week. C, congratulations. You came first. Okay, well done, Celine. And who is Soup? I could use some soup.
Me.
Oh, Alex, well done, well done. All right, so Celine, Alex, and TH. TH? Who's TH?
I'm TH.
Tandy. All right, Tandy. Well done. All right, very good. Congratulations. You all did very well. I know it's obviously challenging, but there are a number, as you can see from this very simple exercise here, the actual exercise has about 60 questions in the to accompany the text. Obviously, that's too many. So I just selected about 20 to illustrate certain cross-cultural nuances from things like hand gestures, lateness, some of the very how we say hello, right? Simple things like that. All of those things, of course, can show variations in how we communicate. I did not capture one on the degree of loudness, but there's a punctuality, the practice of nepotism. So yeah, there are a number of things here, obviously, that can vary across cultures. And I just wanted to highlight as many of the important ones as I could. So you can see that even if we all spoke English, we all spoke the same language, that's no guarantee that communication will be perfect. Absolutely not. There are far too many differences in cultures. As we know now, I would say more so today, and you all are more familiar with it today than say 10 years ago because of the different forms of social media that we have. Many of you are well-traveled as well, and you'll probably be familiar with some of these differences too. So well done. Any questions on it? I'll probably just stop sharing this for now. I saved the screenshot and I'll have to bring some prizes next week. Okay. All right. Let me minimize. All right, great. So